Sasha Matulovic is the marketing director at Connection Telecom and CEO of Fat Budgie, where he is focused on driving business telecommunications into the cloud. Sasha is an entrepreneur and has launched 6 successful companies over the past 15 years. Today, these organizations have grown to become respected players in the telecoms, media, and financial services sectors. Sasha is well known and respected as an energetic marketer with a customer-centric approach to business, which is behind his success. Please welcome Sasha to the stage.
Thank you, and good morning. So I'm excited to share an idea with you today, and thanks to Rashad for introducing the idea of a lens, because that's actually a better way to describe it. It's a lens, and when we look through this lens, we can see a much deeper purpose for us as technologists than simply deploying tech into our customers' companies. When we look through this lens, we can also perhaps better understand answers to some of the million-dollar questions, or now I have to maybe up the bar, billion-dollar questions, like why do 70% of people prefer texting to speaking on the phone? Why are millennials 30% more difficult to or more demanding to serve than Generation X, and almost twice as demanding to serve than the baby boomers? Why is Google so committed to AI that they have renamed their entire research division as Google AI? Questions like, how did Uber disrupt an industry? And why it will certainly happen again. But before I share that lens with you, I want to take you back to a moment in my life that set me on this course a few years before I joined Connection Telecom. And like any good disaster story, it begins on a very cold winter's day in a boiling hot server room. So it was 2011, and we were scaling up our virtual car dealership business. Now, as entrepreneurs, we're all about solving problems. So the problem we're solving with this business is we're making it easier for individuals to buy cars from each other and still get the bank to finance it. But while we are solving this problem for car buyers and for banks, we had problems of our own. This business was growing so quickly, and our workflows were changing so rapidly that our systems couldn't keep up. So on this particular day, I'm standing in this boiling hot server room, I'm sweating, and it's really a glorified broom closet. And standing way too close to me is Lawrence, my PBX technician. Now, Lawrence is trying to explain to me why I need to invest another 45,000 Rand just to make my PBX activate the IVR feature. And this, as you know, is the digital menu that says, for this, press 1, for that, press 2. So in my mind, this is a basic feature that should have come built in with my already top-of-the-range PBX. Well, that was how it was sold to me at the time. But as I'm finding out, it's not the case. And every time my business needs to make a change to its workflows, I have to purchase a new piece of equipment, right? So I've got PCs tapping the lines to make call recordings, which, as some of you know, works brilliantly until you need the call recording, then it's vanished. And I've got gateways for inbound calls, premise cells for outbound calls. I've got a Man 3000, which is sitting in the corner beeping for no apparent reason. And it's at this point that I distinctly remember saying to myself, this is crazy. I cannot run my business's operations like this. I want to run my telecoms the way I run the rest of my life, which is from my laptop and in the browser. And the answer came to me a few weeks later in the form of a cloud PBX by a small telco called Fat Budgie. And the idea that Cloud PBX presented was the largest problem solver that I had ever seen. So I invested in the business. and a few years later, Connection Telecom acquired us. But why am I telling you this story, and what does buying a car and a sweaty server room with a beeping Man 3000 have in common? And what do ideas like a virtual car dealership and cloud PBX and Google's AI have in common? And it's this. It's all about friction and our insatiable demand for frictionless experiences. See, I believe that frictionless experiences and the demand for frictionless experiences is so powerful that it's shaping the world economy as we speak. And technology has such an important, critical role to play in removing friction that I think the first law of technology should be something like to remove the unwanted friction for the other humans. Because that's the job, right? That's what we do. We all here today are friction hunters. Actually, we are frictioneers. And while I won't be the one to write the laws of technology, I'll leave that to this group of learned peers. What I have done is written up the 7 laws of frictioneering for you. And we'll have enough time today to just go through the first 3. But before I do that, I'd like to just share a quick clip with you, which I think you'll relate to.
I was on an airplane, and there was internet, high-speed internet on the airplane. That's the newest thing that I know exists. And I'm sitting on the plane, and they go, open up your laptop. You can go on the internet. And it's fast, and I'm watching YouTube clips. I'm in an airplane. And then it breaks down. And they apologize. The internet's not working. The guy next to me goes, this is bull. Like, how quickly the world owes him something he knew existed only 10 seconds ago. Right.
Right, so you'll see in frictioneering how the rising expectations of the customer plays a massive role. But more on that later. Right now, I'd like you to join me in a quick exercise, and it's an easy one. It'll only take you a few seconds to solve this problem. So here we go. Okay, combined, the price of a bat and a ball is $1.10. Sorry, it has to be dollars. You can't buy anything for R1.10. But a bat and a ball combined is $1.10. If the bat is $1 more than the ball, how much is the ball? Right, so if you guessed 10 cents, like I did, then congratulations. You and I are going to join the ranks of 50% of Harvard and MIT students who also got this one wrong. The answer is, of course, $1.05 for the bat and 5 cents for the ball. But why do half of the world's most intelligent students get this wrong? And the answer is because the mind is actually very lazy. And if presented with an answer that is easy and seems to be correct, we grab it. Now, you'll find this example in a fantastic book called Thinking Fast and Slow by Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman. And Kahneman tells us that one of the mind's characteristics is its laziness, a reluctance to invest more effort than is strictly necessary. Which brings us to the first law of frictioneering, the law of the lazy mind. The law of the lazy mind says, thinking requires lots of energy. When faced with a challenge, the mind has evolved to automatically seek the lowest friction option. Okay, so what does this have to do with our businesses and with technology? Well, I think we need to be acutely aware of the amount of extra mental load we are expecting from our customers. When we ask them to do things like read contracts, proposals, fill out forms, print, sign, scan, email, and my favorite, explain myself 3 times over in the same phone conversation to the support agent. Because if along the way our customers find an easier route and it presents an answer that seems to be correct, They are biologically, chemically, and electrically wired to take this route, like 10 cents. So how does this relate to our billion-dollar questions, our million-dollar questions? Well, it relates to all of them. But let's just take 70% of people preferring text over voice. Now that we look at the same stat through the Frictioneers lens, it should probably read something more like 70% of people find that in 80% of scenarios, texting is the lower friction option than speaking on the phone. And I mean, we'll find this in other places. I'll bet you that the Google Maps generation is going to be plugging in their destination even if they know where they're going. Because it's just too easy to follow a little line on the screen instead of having to think about where to turn left and right. So let's move on to the second law of frictioneering, and this is the law of visible and invisible friction. This law says friction starts out as invisible, and it is tolerated unconsciously by the market. But once the invisible friction is discovered, it becomes real. If significant friction is removed very quickly, disruption can occur. Now, to illustrate this, I'm going to introduce to you the friction quadrant, which we use to visualize the laws of friction and their effects on the system. So on one side, you've got friction, the state of friction, and the other side, the state of frictionless. And above the line, you've got that which is visible to us, and below the line, that which is invisible to us. So friction starts out, as the law tells us, in the first quadrant, where it is invisible. And it is unknown. It is just potential friction. And suddenly it becomes recognized, and we become aware of it, and it moves into the second quadrant of visible friction. This is where we'll see customer frustration building up. Customers believe they're working way too hard to get the results they want. They start looking for easier options. This is where churn is happening, and businesses start to realize they have a real problem they need to solve. And hopefully as businesses we do solve that problem, and we move into the third quadrant, which is where we remove the friction, and it becomes frictionless. This is where our customers become delighted with us, and they begin recommending us to other customers because they're having this visible, frictionless experience. But unfortunately, all too soon, this new, fantastic experience becomes the norm. And customer expectations normalize this experience, and it falls below the line back into the invisible zone. And the frictionlessness of the experience becomes invisible. We remember the guy on the plane who managed to normalize high-speed internet on a plane within 10 seconds. So this can happen really, really quickly. For us as businesses, we need to stay above the line as much as possible in the visible zone. This is where we are recognizing new frictions in our customer journeys, and we're removing them. Friction hunting and frictioneering all the time. It's when we drop below the line that we are at massive risk of somebody else recognizing our invisible frictions. And if they remove that friction quickly enough, this is where disruption occurs. So the obvious example that we're all familiar with is Uber and the taxi industry. So you'll see the delta there between the invisible friction that the taxi industry didn't even know they were causing for their passengers was removed by Uber. But what's next? Right now, all of us in this audience are quietly tolerating the food that is going to waste in our fridges at home. But I think that the refrigerator manufacturers and even the retail grocery outlets are going to have to get pretty smart pretty quickly to avoid being disrupted by an IoT solution like Amazon's button that will promise to deliver fresh food pretty much straight into your mouth. So how does the law, the second law of frictioneering, the law of visible and invisible friction, relate to our million-dollar questions? Well, Google renaming their entire research division as Google AI, sending us a very strong message that this is the most important thing to Google right now. Why is it the most important thing? Well, I think that AI running in the background has the ability to remove so much friction for humans that it will be unprecedented. And it's going to remove frictions that we're not really even aware of, and it's going to do it while we're not watching. It's a perfect example of removing invisible frictions. We've all seen the example in last month's Google conference where their new modulated voice makes phone calls for you and sets up your hair appointments and your restaurant bookings. It's amazing stuff. And when you pair this with big data, now the promise of big data is that it will help companies to understand their customers better than the customers understand themselves. It's a perfect example, again, of invisible friction being identified and being removed without us even having knowledge of it. Spooky stuff. On to the last one, the law of utilization over invention. This law says that there is an abundance of friction in the system. And there's also an abundance of appropriate tools. Frictioneers should utilize today's tools to remove today's friction and avoid the invention trap. So this law is all about the practical world we all live in and operate in every day. But there's a warning in it. Let's be careful not to fall into the inventor's trap, which is where we tend to add more friction to solve a problem than removing it. And instead, if we can utilize some of the existing tools of microservices, cloud services, everything as a service, digital partnerships, and instead of trying to be inventors, we become exceptional integrators, then we can move our businesses over the line into frictionless territory. And I want to share with you how this is working in development teams at the moment. And I'm going to start with our own team back at Connection Telecom. We're faced with a challenge. A large financial services customer of ours had an incident and they wanted to pull some call recordings. But they didn't just want one call recording from a single day. They wanted to learn about a trend. Now, it's difficult enough pulling a single call recording out of thousands on a single day. Imagine trying to find multiple call recordings and you're not sure which day to even look at. It's basically impossible. But by using Google's transcription services, we were able to build a solution prototype for the customer within days. Take a look at this.
So if I just talk from the client side, you can see that we're able to capture and transcribe the audio.
And then if I switch around, you can hear the agent side. So because we're able to make a transcription like this, it should be straightforward to collect from keywords or to do word clouds or to provide intelligent searching. You can see we know when the audio was recorded, so we can seek in the call recordings to the right place.
We're taking advantage of the Google Cloud speech recognition service. As you can see, you stream the audio at Google and they send you back these transcriptions.
And lastly, I'd like to share with you, for me, what was probably the most exciting thing from Singularity University last year when Larry Keeley unveiled to us the tech stack behind Uber and Airbnb. So I was surprised to learn that of the 14 components that make up Uber's tech stack, not one single piece is proprietary. And for Airbnb, only 7 out of the 57 components is proprietary. This means that any one of us here could go and pretty much build something that does what Uber does or what Airbnb does by simply licensing and integrating tools that are already available to us all. Now, I hope that makes you as excited as it makes me. And if it does, I'd like to encourage you tomorrow to go back to the office and take this new lens into your customer journeys and try and measure the amount of friction that you're throwing at your customers. And ask yourself these 5 questions. Number 1, what was the fear that we were addressing when we added this friction in the first place? Number 2, is this fear still a threat to us? Number 3, is this threat material to us? Is this threat probable? And lastly, which existing tools could we utilize to reduce this threat? And then for that very precious invisible friction, which causes so much disruption, let's ask these 2 questions. What is the problem that our business is really solving for our customers? And what thing, idea, concept, real or imaginary, could actually completely remove this problem for customers? Because that is our disruptor. And if we ask these questions, I believe that all of us here will be able to take our businesses into a frictionless future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sasha. That was fantastic, man. I love what you said. Like it inspired me, and I was watching people's faces, it inspired so many other people. But it's really about, there's an Uber moment, there's an Airbnb moment in every single application that we do in our lives. And this is all very well and fantastic about taking away the friction. I don't understand in the world that we're living in today how many organizations that we deal with every day, from going into a Pick and Pay or a Woolworths to, a stupid thing like, for example, me as a consumer, the friction of every time I'm having to take out my loyalty card and swiping it. Do these organizations not see that friction is an aggravation for consumers? And I'm just giving it on the consumer front, but on business side, there's so many other points of friction. Where is it that there is a stumbling block for so many people that are going to go back to the organizations, go to the CEO or the IT manager and saying, we need to do this process. At some point in the hierarchy of an organization, somebody is delaying that process of taking that friction away. Somebody's afraid of doing that. Right. Are you finding the same challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it comes from different places. So, the one thing you mentioned is fear. So fear causes us to add more friction to processes because friction actually makes us safe. When you're flying in the helicopter, it's actually friction that's keeping you up there. So in some instances, friction's a good thing. Okay, like for example, one I heard was, where should there be more friction? And it was in one of our big auditing firms needs to slow things down, add a bit more friction. They made their client journey a bit too slippery and slick. So we add friction because we're scared of the speed of frictionless. Okay, so it comes from fear. And then the other place it comes from is when it's invisible to us.
Yeah.
So companies become complacent because we move into this invisible space where we've done something really well and we think it's going to carry on like that. And it's when we think it's all going fine that's when we're at risk of being disrupted.
Take your organization's hat off and everything. In your view, with what you've said to us today, which industry is ripe for disruption that has incredible amounts of friction that you've been talking about, that somebody's just going to come up and just zap them before they even know it?
Well, I think that, we're seeing a lot of that in the media industry.
Jeez. Don't tell me these things.
Sorry. So I think that's a space that definitely is ripe for
finance,
change.
Banking?
Absolutely. I think that where they've got trouble is they're trying to keep customers safe. So being able to keep them safe and at the same time give them a great experience.
Okay.
That's the challenge. In that
Remove
space.
the friction. Sasha, great talk. Here's a gift from the team at My Broadband.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to Sasha. Give him a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks very much.